Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Land App webinar, where we're going to be talking about data-powered decisions, your key to efficient land management. Today's a round table, which means it's not going to be a Land App demo. Delighted to be joined by some of our partners from Ordnance Survey, Wendling, Beck, and Surrey Wildlife Trust, who in time you will meet. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. Today is, as usual, being recorded as a webinar, so therefore your microphones and cameras will remain off for the duration of the webinar. However, that doesn't mean we don't want to hear from you. This is a dedicated time for you to be able to ask questions. So we've enabled the Q&A function, which you should be able to see on the bottom of your Zoom screen. And please ask any questions you like. We've got a team of experts. We'll try our best to answer as many questions as we can. And that will happen just after the conversations that we're going to have before. If there's time, please feel free to stay after the webinar. We like to stop recording and just have a bit of an informal conversation, so feel free to stay around for that. And the recording of it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. It says 3 to 5 days, but the marketing team are getting a bit quicker at that, and sometimes it's uploaded today, but we'll see how busy everyone is. Also, once you leave the webinar, Zoom will automatically pop up a little survey. It's just going to be a couple of questions. It keeps us understanding what you want to get out of these webinar series. So please do fill it in. It only takes 30 seconds. And even if you leave early, you should still see that pop up on your screen. So the agenda today is we're going to do quick intros, both from myself and from the panels. We're then going to just have a conversation with each of them in turn. So we're going to first hear from Wendling Beck. We've got Glenn Anderson. We're then going to hear from Surrey Wildlife Trust with Matt Gilliatt. And we've also got Ordnance Survey here with Sophie. After that conversation, we're then going to open up the round table where all of the panelists will come off mute and we'll have a bit of a conversation. I've got some pre-prepared questions just out of my own interest. So this is definitely a topic that I'm interested in, but we will also be going through your questions as well once they start coming through. So firstly, intros for myself. So I'm not sure if we've met everyone here, but I'm Dan. I'm one of the directors of Land App. I'm going to be chairing today's roundtable. I've been at Land App for over 4 years, and I've got a background in agri-advice and zoology. So very much focused on that sustainable land use and really keen to see data be used in smart ways to help real world change. So I won't ask the speakers to come off mute yet, but just to give you a flavour who is on the call that you'll hear from soon. We've got Sophie, who's the Customer Development Manager at Ordnance Survey. We've got Glenn Anderson, who's the driving force and co-founder behind the Wendling Beck Environmental Project. And we've also got Matt Gilliatt, who's the GIS and Data Manager at Surrey Wildlife Trust. So if you've got any questions for any of these panelists that you want to hear from, or if you've got any questions for Land App, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So before we hear from the panelists, just to steer you to a couple of other resources that may be useful. Firstly, we have a YouTube channel. It's just at Land App on YouTube, where there's a wealth of knowledge in there. There's previous roundtables that we've hosted. I think back in November, we did one around agroforestry, which is well worth a watch. We've got introductory training, how to use the platform, but there's a whole other avenue that you can explore at your own leisure. So they were being recorded, and that is where the system will upload this recording afterwards. Next week, we are having kind of a second part to today's webinar, which is kind of mastering the Ordnance Survey data tools within Land App. That webinar is going to be a Land App demo where we're going to cover a whole lot of things Ordnance Survey. So we're going to look at the different OS data layers that we have in Land App. We're going to look at print functions, how can you export clean authoritative prints from Land App, either pin up on the wall or use for submissions, but also going to look at other things like base maps and premium data points, and of course, some of the key products that Ordnance Survey creates and Land App sells on their behalf, such as OS Master Map and a much unutilized field boundary data set, which I'm really excited about, which helps you map your hedgerows, your dry stone walls, your fences, whether that be using it for environmental purposes or for other. So that's next Friday, Friday the 30th at midday, and you can register for it on our website at thelandapp.com/events. Just while I'm here, I think I've got 2 more slides just pointing you to other resources. So firstly, on our website, we do have a functions page. That functions page gives you a breakdown of the various tools that LandApp offers to help you with your land management. And that covers all of the free tools. So you don't need to pay LandApp to start using it. There's lots of free functions on there, but it also covers the different functions that you get within the subscription tiers. So do head to the functions page. And then more recently, we have released a data layers page. You can find it by going to thelandapp.com/data-layers or navigating to it on our website. And that is an interactive web page where you can search for the different data layers that we host on LandApp. So if you want to know what data layers we host without logging in, you can come to that page and really start to feel empowered to start using those data layers. Finally, LandApp Mobile. Hopefully the marketing team have reached you, but if not, we released an update to LandApp Mobile about 6 weeks ago. And this is a genuine step change in how you can use the LandApp out in the field. And it now allows you to take your plans, such as the images on the right-hand side, and go and take those plans and evidence them, improve them, edit them as you wish. And that includes offline mode. So if you've got issues with mobile signal, not a problem. You can download it and work offline. But also as part of that release, we've released our new collaborate function, which just allows people to collaborate on the same plan at the same time without any issues with the conflict. So it means that multiple people can take the same thing out and go, I don't know, walk in different directions and complete hedgerow surveys or soil samples, all working from that same plan. And that's available from the App Store. So it's on both iOS and Android. And then finally, there's the data services. So we sell data, we provide data, and we've got a dedicated page called the Data Services page, where you can look at all the different Ordnance Survey products we sell, our UK Habitat Best Guess Baseline that we built really with biodiversity net gain in mind, but it does work for the whole of Great Britain, plus other tools like wetlandscapes as well. So if you're interested about what types of data LandApp produces, do go to the Data Services page. Okay, so the first guest I'd like to welcome to the stage, so to speak, is Glenn Anderson, who's the co-founder of the Wendling Beck Environmental Project. Glenn is a fifth-generation farmer, and he's the driving force behind the Wendling Beck Environmental Project, which is a privately financed nature recovery project. He believes that farming and land management are key tools to combat climate change and biodiversity loss. And so before I hand over to Glenn, I always like to say the word ambitious, because just extracted as of the other week, Glenn is responsible for the largest biodiversity net gain site on the register so far. We extracted all the different sites today, very much skewing around that less than 100 hectares. But you can see Glenn and the Wendling Beck team are out there on the far right-hand side, really bringing a huge amount to the sector. So Glenn, thank you for joining. If you'd like to introduce yourself, and I'll put up your slides for you in the background.
Yeah, hi everybody. Yeah, thank you. I don't need to say too much more with that introduction from Dan, but yeah, I'm a farmer in Norfolk and was responsible partly for forming the Wendling Beck project 5 years ago now. So project is a couple of thousand acres. It's pretty much 100% land use change, looking at creating a kind of a broad mosaic of different high distinctiveness habitats, and using nature markets, so biodiversity net gain and nutrient neutrality or nutrient mitigation in our case, to finance that project over the very long term. So there's 4 farmers involved in the project. We really wanted to deliver something at scale, sort of to test sort of Horton principles and create a really big space for nature. And over those 5 years, it's been a huge learning curve, but we are getting there now. We're sort of at market readiness. We're, as Dan says, we're on the DEFRA register. We're actively trading at the moment, and we're really pleased with how it's going. Actually, it's probably better than we would have anticipated at this particular time. We always thought that the BNG market would be a little bit slow to get going, but yeah, really comfortable. So if you just flick on down, I'll give a little bit of context. So this is a kind of a future state map of the project, so a bit of a vision map. We're not quite there yet. So this land is starting the transition at the moment. You can see the Wendling Beck River, which is where the project gets its name, going through that kind of green spine in the middle. But the plan is to create a kind of a pretty contiguous area of land with multiple kind of mosaics of high quality habitats within there. We've transitioned probably about 40 or 50% of the habitat on the ground at the moment. And that's been a learning curve in itself, but we're kind of getting to the grips with it. BNG does tend to drive kind of a grassland heavy habitat mix, but really important high distinctiveness grasslands within that, so lowland meadow and floodplain wetland mosaic and things like that. We have a number of kind of ambitions within this to kind of restore the river and really sort of preserve the underlying natural capital within the overall project area. And obviously data and mapping is absolutely key in that process. So although this is a kind of a pretty vision map that we've developed over the last few years, the underlying base data behind this is sort of embedded in GIS, and LandApp is the tool that we really use to be able to develop that. We work quite a lot with Dan and the team around the kind of the best guess baseline for the BNG, and also incorporated multiple sources of third-party data into that to use it as a kind of a decision management tool. So it's kind of been the bedrock of the evolution of the design, if you like, and that kind of co-design process. But that's kind of morphing now into actually tracking the habitat establishment and the monitoring and everything that we're doing in the process. So if you just flick to the next slide, Dan. So this is the baseline. We did our baseline in May 2021. You can see the kind of the green corridor down the middle, which is the river boundary, and then all of that mix of kind of different forms of orange is different forms of intensive arable. So you have these kind of broad lungs around the river, which were all in arable at that time. And then if you flick forward, Dan, this is the kind of the transition that we're heading towards. So within that, we have a number of habitat types. I think we actually cover 28 different habitat types within the BNG metric, and we're also looking at stacking nutrient neutrality through some of that land reversion as well. So right now we have a conservation covenant across the whole project area, which is with RSK. We also have 3 Section 106 agreements and 6 Section 33 agreements binding the long-term land use of the project as well. And as you can see, just being able to kind of track and map and understand what's happening at a kind of a parcel level is absolutely critical to the project. And with the best will in the world, I think all projects, let alone a project of this size and complexity, things change over time. So that adaptive management is really important within this, and be able to kind of pivot and understand how the land is transitioning in practice. The mapping layers give us the opportunity to kind of map that, track it, and then make decisions on the ground about what we're doing, and then potentially change things as we go forward as well. So if you flick forward one more. The other part of this is really data management and the monitoring that's going on in the project as well. So whilst we're measuring everything and monitoring everything at a kind of a parcel level for biodiversity, net gain, and nutrients, we also really want to understand what's happening at a species level. So there's a huge amount of monitoring going into the project. We've invested about 300K in the last 24 months just in monitoring and understanding actually what's happening on the ground, and that covers sort of a myriad of different technology and kind of manual transects and surveys, looking at things like bioacoustics. I think we have 22 bioacoustic monitors around the project at the moment, doing birds and bats. We're working with Nature Metrics on eDNA samples across the areas that are already in transition. We're corresponding that to control points in the landscape. We've used quite a bit of remote sensing, and Dan and LandApp have been involved in that process as well, and actually mapping that. Tons of data coming off around what's actually happening within the habitat transition. So fixed point photography, with pitfall trapping, moth trapping. We're tracking water quality data, so we have real-time water quality sensors out on the project. We have a carbon flux tower out now as well, so capturing information around the carbon fluxes. We're also looking at above ground carbon sequestration through woody biomass as well. So when you boil all that together, and you start to aggregate that data over the whole project, and as the kind of the project expands and the habitat gets bigger, then that data requirement goes up, and actually being able to manage and store that data is absolutely key for the project, and then pass that data back to Natural England and some of the responsible bodies to understand what's happening. So I think that's a pretty good overview. I don't know if you've got any questions down at that point, or whether you want to leave that for the roundtable.
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, you can see why we've got Glenn on the call. This is a data-driven project. I suppose my question to you, Glenn, just from the off, is one thing that'd be worth explaining is where the balance between that data-driven decision, but also the in-field decisions are being made. So you obviously had accountability, for example, in the initial survey. I guess what role do you feel ground truthing and getting boots on the ground plays alongside the data?
So I think the data gives us the tools to be able to make those decisions, but there is always a role for boots on the ground. And there's no substitute for the ecologists coming out and understanding actually what's happening. But I think as the technology gets better, and particularly the kind of the AI and machine learning process, as that becomes more informed as part of that machine learning process, then I think that data becomes more important and more accurate, and I think we'll start to automate more stuff over time from where we are now. The other thing is, particularly with the Land app mobile, actually being able to understand and geolocate things on the ground is really important. So we use Land app mobile on a daily basis. We're tracking what's happening, but we're also tracking the kind of the layout of the design. So if we've got a couple of parkland designs going on at the moment, actually geolocating the precise location of where those trees are and what type of tree they are and species and that sort of stuff, we just wouldn't be able to do it without that technology, basically.
Perfect. Glenn, thank you so much. We'll come back to you in a minute. If anyone's got any questions for Glenn, please feel free to use the Q&A, because I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer them. So next up, delighted to introduce Matt Gilliatt, who's the GIS and data manager for Surrey Wildlife Trust. Matt has nearly 30 years of experience in conservation and GIS, including a decade in Surrey. He manages the GIS resources to make information accessible for the real world, and is particularly interested in long-term monitoring of outcomes. So Matt, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into a bit of a case study.
Cheers, Dan. Thanks for the introduction. Well, I'll just say I don't have 30 years experience. I'm a youthful 40-year-old, so I wasn't that active in 10, but we must be pushing 20 years experience now.
Okay. Apologies.
No worries.
I'll blame my researchers.
Almost 20 years experience in conservation, and probably more than pushing 15 years of those have been specifically focused on GIS, and a decade of that has been at Surrey Wildlife Trust, where I work on various projects. One part of my role is managing database and general GIS systems. We have 70 GIS users now, and I try to keep control of them. Well, it's that trying to get that balance between giving them as much power as possible and trying to control what they're putting into the system and maintaining a high quality of work. Currently, I'm working on a lot of LNRS projects, and looking at tools such as connectivity analysis and that to try and help support planning and outcomes, as you said, Dan. Yeah.
Great. And LNRS stands for Local Nature Recovery Strategy.
Indeed, it does. Thank you very much.
No problem. So Matt has been pivotal involved in Surrey's local nature recovery strategy. One of the things I wanted to have a bit of a conversation with Matt on, because they've been doing this for a little while, is kind of their use of Land app in a slightly more ecosystem way. So I don't know whether, Matt, you want to give a bit of an overview of how Surrey Wildlife Trust at the moment is using Land app as kind of end users, but you in the data team are using ArcGIS as kind of that supporting GIS decision tool as well.
Cool, thank you. Yeah. So like I mentioned, we have 70-ish GIS users directly within Surrey Wildlife Trust. And we use ArcGIS as our main GIS system. So we have about 10 users on Arc Pro, which is the desktop version, which is the most kind of advanced and powerful tool. And then the majority of our other users are on Arc Online, which is a web-based GIS version. Still quite powerful, still very useful. And we also have many people using the field apps. So similar to the land app field apps, you can use them out in the field, things like Survey 123 and field maps are the two main ones. And we hold all of our GIS data now on the Arc Online portal. So it's all cloud-based, which is we adopted it over COVID when we realized remote working and kind of cloud access was the way to go. But it's not always the easiest system. It's a very powerful system. It can do a lot. It really is great. I'm a strong proponent of the Arc systems, but I do find that non-professional GIS people, general land managers, and just other wildlife trust staff who aren't as interested or as focused on GIS do find LandApp to be a much more kind of intuitive and user-friendly way to plot to capture data. So I don't want to remove that tool from them. I like to use the right tool for the right job, so to speak. And as a data manager, I want to keep everything in one place. So it stresses me out, but I have to be careful not to take tools away from people. So what we do with the Land app is we have an API link. And Dan, can you tell me what does API stand for?
It stands for Application Programming Interface.
Excellent.
Let's get that test.
So yeah, so Dan manages his side of things there, but it's a very clever little tool, which essentially means we can capture data using the Land app and use it to because it's much more user friendly. Internally, our ecologists like to use it because when they're in the field, they like to capture data pen and paper often, and then come back to the office and use Land app just to quickly put using the UK Hab template to capture the land cover data. And then this links without us having to do anything. You just publish the UK Hab layer, and it flies as if by magic from the Land app to the Arc Online portal, where we're able to. So all of our data is stored centrally still, and we have full control over and visibility of everything that's captured. Yeah.
Yeah. So what the exciting bit about this is basically all we've got is a lovely bit of plumbing that connects the Land app users who are using it kind of in an individual site. So it might be a wildlife reserve, it might be a client that they're helping with some agri advice. It allows them to use that kind of user friendly interface that is the Land app, but it means that Matt and his team don't need to worry about manually moving data from Land app to their GIS system, which allows them to do detailed analysis and reports, because we handle that refresh for them. And I think there's going to be a couple of people on the call that have got lots of Land app users. We've got big organizations, some over 300 strong. We want to ensure that those individual users are contributing to that bigger picture, and as much as possible we can automate, the better. And this is where Matt and I have been speaking and working on this for, I don't know, maybe 2 years, and it seems to just allow us to fill our own niches. We're not GIS analysts, but Matt is. So if we can provide good quality data that gets shipped in a consistent format from those templates that Matt's describing, UK habitat classification being one of them, it means that Matt can focus on what he really wants to do, which I think is super exciting. Matt, what's the, I guess, with all of this, you've touched on one of them, I think, but what's the biggest challenges that you've kind of either seen for yourself or from your team when you're working with geospatial data?
Probably consistency, particularly I keep mentioning the ecology services team, because there's a wide range of skill levels in that team. And previously, probably before we started using the Land app as the main kind of data flow workflow system, we'd often receive, some people would give us habitat mapping in a PowerPoint, some on the back of it, drawn on the back of an envelope, and some on the GIS system. But by being very consistent with the Land app, we've able to kind of formalize all of that, which makes it so much easier to analyze, if nothing else. So we can look at things from across the county without having to pull together many different sources. So I think that's been a real benefit.
Yeah, I used to do a lot of big data handling, and I think one of the beauties of how the templates are set up is it's a drop-down list. So when you say we're being consistent, providing the team are using the same template, they're all choosing from the same drop-down list. No one's misspelling the word wildflowers or using capital letters when they don't expect to see them, which means when you receive it, you're getting that clean, consistent data, which, yeah, when you're running a report, makes it a lot easier to hopefully handle. So really good to hear that. Matt, thank you so much. We're going to move on to Sophie at Ordnance Survey. But again, if anyone's got any questions for Matt or how the Wildlife Trusts more generally are using either Land App or bigger, I guess, GIS generally, please do feel free to pop it in the Q&A function. Okay, so just want to introduce my final speaker, who's Sophie Coley from Ordnance Survey. She's the Customer Development Manager in the Environment team. And she's been working at Ordnance Survey for just over 2 years, and she's here to give us a bit of a general update on Ordnance Survey, and I've got some questions to ask as well. So, Sophie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you very much. Yes, so I think you've given me a nice introduction there. I am Sophie from OS, and I've predominantly been working with our environment customers and within the public sector geospatial agreement as well, which I shall touch on in a little bit more detail, hopefully as we go through our conversation.
Perfect. Thanks, Sophie. Well, let's start there then. For those that aren't aware of what the public sector geospatial agreement is, what is it and who can use it?
Yes, so the Public Sector Geospatial Agreement, as I will keep referring to as the PSGA, just for ease, launched approximately 5 years ago now, I think. I do believe we're in the 5th year. So essentially, the PSGA is a contract between OS and the Government Digital Services, which was previously the Geospatial Commission, and it provides a route essentially for public sector members to access and use OS data. But not only that, the PSGA has then enabled our data as a whole to improve over that period. So it's available to, everyone, not just public sector. So there's new ways to share the data, new ways to access it. We now, we've had the introduction of the OS Data Hub, the OS NGD, which I will touch a lot more on, I'm sure, as we go through this chat. So particularly some of those key benefits of the NGD and how our data is evolving is that you can select the data that you need. You don't need to take everything. There's a lot more enhancements. It's a lot richer data. You can access it in various different ways. The updates are more frequent. So actually you could be receiving daily updates depending on what the data is that you're actually taking. So yeah, that's the PSGA. I won't go too much because I'm sure I'm going to talk about it a lot more.
No, it's okay. And just from our perspective, so just to outline, the PSGA, or that Public Sector Geospatial Agreement, primarily gives access to councils or parishes, free Ordnance Survey data. So I guess the first call to action is, if anyone's on this call who works directly for, a public sector body, do get in touch with the Land App support team, because we can get you access to free Ordnance Survey data. So that includes, baseline base maps, that includes data overlays, and that includes a load of other really exciting data. But I think the additional bit that maybe people don't know is within the PSGA, there's also subcontractor agreements. So there are individuals who work with councils. They may not be a council themselves, but if you're delivering on behalf of the council, you can sign subcontractor agreements with that PSGA member to get access to that OS data. There are obviously terms, which, Sophie, I'll let you elaborate on, such as how you're using it. You can't use it for your own business purposes, but if you're delivering something for the council, whether that's supporting them with local nature recovery strategies, whether that's helping with the 25-year environment plan, you can actually access more OS data. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes. Yes. If you are doing a service, a project, a task, whatever it might be that is for a public sector member who is a part of the PSGA, then you have access to OS data for free. You can, you know, for the purpose of that piece of work that you're doing, you can utilize OS data to do so.
Great. Well, just taking that kind of thread a bit forward, I think licensing is always something that our audience is a bit nervous about. So I guess what I'd love to know is, what are the most common misconceptions about Ordnance Survey and kind of its role with a particular aspect of licensing, or kind of what its reason for being is?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I suppose there's probably two misconceptions. So one of them is licensing, which I'll touch on in a minute, and probably the first one is just a general, you know, a lot of people, when you say to OS, they're like, oh yes, you know, it's the paper maps, it's for leisure, it's for recreation, it's, you know, my walking routes, it's all those sorts of things, or a backdrop map. But actually, you know, OS data does so much more than that. We really do occupy a, you know, a unique space and create one of the UK's key national, you know, geospatial data sets. You know, we're making over 20,000 changes a day to our database of over 500, I think it's 5, I'm saying these statistics, but I think they're true, 500 million geographic features, you know, across England, Scotland and Wales. So there is a wealth of data there. And, you know, we're enabling users to do more from, as I say, it's not just that backdrop mapping, but it's how can you do analytical, how can you get those insights, you know, that you need to get to deliver the projects that you're trying to achieve. So I suppose then the second misconception goes back to that sort of licensing piece. And, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say that licensing is not complex, because it is, and I appreciate that. And there is a lot of, you know, there is a lot of nuances to it, and it's quite, you know, difficult to get to grips with. But essentially, you know, OS is really working towards how do we make that easier for the users? How do we ensure that, you know, access to data is straightforward and it doesn't appear to be this big complex thing that you can't do, when actually there is probably a lot you can do that you don't realize you can do. So you've already touched on there, you know, if you are working for a public sector, for a member of the PSGA, you know, for a project, you have access to OS data that you can use. There are, through our public sector contractor license, we also have a public sector contractor end use license. So that all refers to then actually what you're doing with the data, how you publish it. And yes, there are restrictions to that. So, you know, it depends what you're actually publishing within that data set. But equally, there again, there is an exemption process. So if there is, it might not fit quite the license itself, but we also have an exemption process that actually says, do you know what, for what you have done, it absolutely makes sense that you should be publishing this data. And that's done on a use, you know, a use by use case example. But it very much is, we are here to support, you know, it's ask us the question, you know, and we will help you to make sure that, you know, you can use the data, you are using it in the right way, and that you can get to where you need to get to. I mean, we have the data exploration license, for example, so that actually enables you to use OS data for up to 6 months for free, to explore, to use the data to work out if it actually would be of benefit for you for the project that you're trying to achieve. There is a whole list of licenses. I won't go into all the detail now, and I won't sit here and say I know absolutely everything about every single license. I have a whole team that know all those nitty-gritty bits, but there are lots of licenses, and I understand that's why it often comes across as complex. But it's very much have the conversation with us. We are very much trying to ensure that, you know, you are getting access to the data that is available to you, and you're using it as in the best way that you can.
Yeah. Perfect. We as Land App have been partnered with Ordnance Survey since we started. Like we were initially funded by the Geovation program, which is kind of an accelerator program for tech trying to take Ordnance Survey data. So and that's what the little logo at the bottom right of my screen is showing, is, you know, we're a licensed partner as well. So if anyone's got any questions about OS or they're unsure, please don't hesitate to ask. I would echo what Sophie says. You know, at times I get confused, but, you know, it's very easy to get put in touch with the right person that can help you find the right license. So whether you're looking for that replica license that we hold for your public sector geospatial agreement, or whether you want to get a lovely big print that you put on your website, just ask questions, because it's really good quality. It's world renowned, but at times I feel people are nervous to use it because of the licensing. And there's lots of great open data as well. I suppose my last question, Sophie, before I come on to the kind of round table and invite everyone else, is what are you most looking forward to in terms of what OS is currently working on or what they're just about to release in the next year or two?
Yeah, so I think I haven't really touched on it too much now, but the National Geographic Database, which essentially we have been evolving over the last 5 years throughout the PSGA, but actually, this data is available to everybody, not just the public sector, has really opened up, our data and has evolved what our data is and what's in it. So as part of that, every 6 months we sort of have an enhancement. So they usually happen in March and September. But the fundamental thing about the National Geographic Database is very much it's set up in a way you can take what you need. So, if how it's set up, I like to call it a bit of a sweet shop. It's pick a mix. You can go in and say, actually, for example, let's take Topo at the moment, on there is absolutely everything. You've got buildings, you've got roads, you've got your rivers, you've got your land, everything. But you could go into the NGD and you go, do you know what? I actually only want to see land cover. And that's all I want. That's all I'm interested in. Oh, and actually, I might throw in field boundaries, which I know you've already touched on. And therefore, you go, right, so I select those things, and they're the things I take. I don't need all the other information. That's the only bit of data that I need. And that's what the NGD very much allows you to do. And as time has gone over the last 5 years, there has been a lot of enhancements to that. So let's take land, for example. There are 9 themes within the NGD, and one of those is the land theme. So within that, we actually have land cover and land use, and we have everything mapped to UNIS and UK BAP currently. And as part of that, it then gives you a percentage cover attribution as to what that is. So for example, it might say, for this land parcel, 50% is coniferous trees and 50% is rough grassland. And that's the sort of detail you can get from the NGD that you wouldn't necessarily get currently from some of our existing master map products. And about a year ago, as I've said, we released field boundaries. So these are the line features in the structures collection with geometry demarking the field boundaries outside of urban areas. So they can be anything from, I think there's the tree canopy, wooded strip, hedge, wall, other, which is generally a fence, or unknown, where actually we haven't been able to, see that from the aerial imagery. And then we also do actually have the urban areas for anything that is within the Rural Payment Agency Rural Land Register. That's a mouthful. So yes, that is also included in there. Some enhancements to probably look forward to that I think might be relevant are in the September release, we actually have continuous tide lines. We have river, I can never say this, river widths. I don't know why I was found that a mouthful to say. River widths and continuous tide lines, intertidal areas. We also have vacant and derelict land coming in March 26. Another one that's probably relevant, actually, we're hoping to release some sample data in June time, which is our enhanced land cover mapping, which will actually include UK HAB classifications as part of that. So that's upcoming very soon. Yeah, I think that's a snapshot. I'll just sit here and list off a load of things and lose everybody, so I should stop there.
No, perfect. There's a couple of things that you picked up just want to flag. So firstly, if anyone's interested in seeing what that field boundary data looks like, we are demoing it during the next webinar next Friday. So reminder, it's on the 30th. If you want to see the field boundary data and how you can access it in Land App, so hedgerows, walls, wooded strips, please do come along to that. And I think, yeah, the National Geographic Database, we are now ingesting as well. So we're starting to move to it. And I think the key thing for us is we used to have to wait, if it was quarterly or every 6 weeks for things to be updated. And now it's as soon as Ordnance Survey release a new product, we can have access to it. So whether that's the building from your farm has moved places or you've got a new field boundary, that data is more real time than it's ever been before, which is, yeah, obviously extra work for our data engineers to make sure we wire it in. But for you as an end user, it's more relevant. It's upping the cadence to, you know, daily releases rather than, you know, weekly or monthly releases. So Sophie, thank you so much. Loads of great stuff coming from OS. I think take home message is definitely just ask questions. You know, there's lots of partners out there. LandApp is one of them that kind of helps resell data. And if you want to have a direct conversation with Ordnance Survey to work out your circumstances, we're happy to help facilitate. So, you know, the support channel on LandApp can help steer you in the right direction. Sophie, thank you so much. There's questions coming in. So what I thought I'd do is, if everyone else who's off mute can come back on, and we're going to do a bit of a round table. I'm going to start with just asking some of the questions that I've got prepped, but I can see them coming through the Q&A as well. So I'm going to keep it fairly brief, and then we can dive into people on the call. So Glenn, firstly for you, kind of what actually is your day job? Like what do you do from day to day, and how does mapping play its part?
So my day job is fairly complex, and I wear far too many hats. So we're obviously delivering and running the Wendling Beck project on a day-to-day basis. So that's pretty varied from you know, quite complex legal conversations with local planning authorities, developers, etc., to the administration of the sale of the credits and registering those, and making sure that they're all done in the right way, that we kind of geolocate the sales part to the delivery part, which is quite complex in itself, particularly over a project of that size. So mapping is really important in understanding what we've sold where, not helped by the complexity of the BNG metric and particularly the temporal multiplier. So actually being able to track where the units are coming from and where the drawdown is of that. I also wear another hat for a company called Swallowtail. So a couple of years ago, we set up a small consulting business trying to share some of the knowledge off the back of Wendling Beck. We're working with a number of projects at the moment, probably covering about 14 projects, covering somewhere over 700,000 acres now. So some quite big chunky projects in there, a number of landscape recovery projects as well. And, you know, the mapping is absolutely critical. So multiple landowners, you know, really big landscape scale transition, multiple routes to market. So this kind of goes beyond BNG and compliance markets and starts to bring in voluntary markets, supply chain stuff. You know, carbon is a big part of those projects as well. And actually understanding at a kind of a landscape level how we can start to design and envisage kind of land use change, and then marry that with commercial opportunities to kind of fund it and bring the landowners involved some sort of long-term revenue streams from that as well. So
there's just so much on your plate. And actually, Jim Horsfield's got a relevant question that I'm going to just ask now. Is obviously you're at the complex side of things, you know, technical complexity costing 300k to get you up where you are. I suppose, what would you say to smaller land holdings who perhaps don't have that capital investment? You know, what is the actual scale, or is BNG a tangible route for them to explore if they really want to move forward in a similar light to yourself?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's something for everybody in there. It really just depends on the appetite and the willingness of the landowner to kind of make that transition. My advice would be don't do it for financial reasons. You know, it's easy to see some of the numbers around BNG and think that it's a kind of a, you know, a lucrative kind of income stream. The reason that some of those payments are quite high is because it's really long-term management. You've got a massive inflationary effect in there. You know, when you boil it all down, it probably compares marginally better than farming, particularly if you're on marginal land like we are. But do it for the right reasons. You know, we really believe that we need to create some kind of exemplar sites of nature recovery and restoration around the country. We obviously can't take all of the land out of production. We need food as well, and trying to kind of marry that on particularly some of the more marginal land, and having the right opportunities in the right place. So land use optimization particularly is becoming really important, and LandApp has a has a really important role to play in that, and data management generally within mapping. If you're looking at land use optimization, you're integrating multiple data sets around, it might be habitat types, water pathways, but it also might include things like yield mapping, and some of the kind of the agri-business side of things, and they're all important. So trying to understand how that all works is absolutely critical. But there's definitely something for everyone. It doesn't, scale is advantageous, aggregation is advantageous, but everybody can do something with the right, if they've got the right ambition and the right sort of fundamental drivers to do it.
Yeah. And I think I'd be amiss not to say, I think a lot of it is about taking the time to upskill yourself, particularly if you're a small area, taking the time to learn how to use tools, for example, like LandMap, really put you in a driving seat, because you can very quickly, for example, appraise how many biodiversity units you could generate and then work out whether it's worth paying an ecologist or going down another route. Because I think a lot of the times the default is you need to pay the consultant to work it out now, and it might go to a dead end. The more we can empower that end farmer or someone that's working with the farmer to at least just get a quick sense, within half an hour or within an hour, whether it's worth going down that route, will hopefully allow you to make that decision a bit more pragmatically without kind of hedging your bets too much.
Yeah, I mean, LandApp's a great sort of low-cost tool for that early development stage as well. But we're quite far down the road now, and we still use it on a daily basis. It's a good way of kind of aggregating all of that data together.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. Matt, I was just going to come over to you. I think we've spoken quite a lot about the hypothetical and the actual data behind the scenes, but I'm just wondering if you can just give a shout out to some real world impact that some of the projects you've been working on have had, and how biodiversity or how nature or how land has benefited, and kind of the role of data within that.
Sure. A good project to focus on perhaps is the Wishmore project on Barossa, our Pause allotment, which is a heathland, but it was a wet heath and has recently become, in recent generations, dried out fully due to, poor management, really. So, or at least a management which doesn't work with the nature in mind. So, large project managed to have access to lots of LiDAR data, and this was just incredible for working out flow dynamics and really taking an evidence-based approach. It's also really helpful for to re-wetting the area has been really beneficial for flood alleviation also. So the project ended last year, and we're already seeing an increase in water-loving species. Of course, very early days in terms of the monitoring, but very positive outlook for biodiversity in the area. It's a peatland in the area, and peat is such a rare habitat, so it really is a vital project for improving that in the area.
Well, on that, I know Natural England just released their new peatland data set, which I think we're getting into LandApp in the next couple of weeks. Have you had a look at it yet? And is it a bit of a game changer?
It does look excellent. Although we noticed yesterday that the Wishmore stream area is actually missing from there. So there's been a slight breakdown in communications on the way somewhere, because we did submit it as an area, peatland area. So perhaps something's fallen down, but it does look like an excellent data set.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to be a static data set, so I think there's going to be opportunities to keep it alive. But yeah, that's one data set that just passed my mind when you said it, that is definitely coming, and it's really exciting, because the one that's currently in LandApp and the one that's broadly used is a 2016 view of peatland, whereas now they've got a 2025 updated one. That's really exciting. Okay, I'm going to move on to a bit more of the Q&A from the audience. We've got 15 minutes left, so roundtable people, keep your answers to less than 30 seconds, would just be a bit of a request. So first, a question to Sophie from Ben Rogers. Are you able to provide an update on OS's provision of the National Underground Asset Register, please?
Yes. So I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, because I've not been in the detail, but I can absolutely pick that up offline and come back with you with a lot more information if that would be relevant, because there is a lot there, and probably more than 30 seconds as well to unpack that. So I will absolutely come back and share that information with you.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll be following up with all the attendees. If there's any resources, any other speakers want to include in that follow up, please message the thread that we've got going together. Glenn, coming back to you, I guess a question from Peter Sparrow. Besides biodiversity net gain, do you see kind of in the future other forms of green finance, grants, funds that are going to come on board to help bring in more income for your project in particular?
That's a good question. Hi, Peter. How you doing? Potentially for Wendling Beck, we're not 100% confident with some of the policies in terms of their longevity. So, we have put most of our eggs in one basket around these compliance markets, but obviously there are moves afoot within the planning and infrastructure bill and various other policy pieces, and governments come and go, and we have half an eye on that. So part of the reason that we're investing so much in the baselining is to try and give us access to other potential markets if we need them. At the moment, we don't need them, and we within the current stacking rules, we think it would be a problem. But yeah, absolutely, across other projects, 100%.
Right. Fingers crossed, because I think that what we constantly hear is people want revenue streams. I think there's a lot of opportunity out there to get either loans or building up finance, but we need to understand how we genuinely form revenue streams around good farming practice and good food production. So yeah, fingers crossed, that's moving forward. A question from Matt from Simon. Thanks, Simon. We've heard today about using data to make better decisions in the present, but as we start to build up richer data sets and kind of understanding those longer term horizons and histories, Simon's curious to hear what you think the potential is for using this data to make predictions into the future. Like, what we'll be able to forecast, how could that influence decisions today?
Interesting question. Yeah. Well, we can model things. Something I've been working on a lot is the connectivity analysis, and that's so look at that specifically. That's quite nice because you build a model. In fact, I'm using the Land Best Guess habitat data set, just a quick shout out there, Dan. And that's nice because what you can do with that, once you've built your model of habitat land cover, you can see how species can move through the landscape currently. You can then update the habitat land cover with predicted changes. So I've done a piece of work on the M25 land bridge, for example, across the M25, and that showed how that would increase movement across there. You can also say if this building development was to take place and it would cause another blocker for movement, you can estimate or you can model what that effect that's going to have on movement through the landscape in a negative way as well. So yeah, I think once you start building models, then you can model for future scenarios.
Yeah, that ability of kind of predictability is getting better. And I think that long and short of it, 10 years ago, most people were using a paper-based map, which makes it very difficult to start making those predictions. Whereas now, when we get farmers in this digital space and we start to understand their, I guess, aspirations, we can start to understand where is likely to see habitat restoration. I guess just a follow-up question on that is, do we envisage the local nature recovery strategies being dynamic, i.e. farmer starts delivering something that makes the whole recovery update, or is it going to be kind of a static view of the land as of 2025, not taking into account what happened in 2026, for example?
It's definitely an iterative thing. I think this first one is a static shot, and it's going to have limitations. But the general view is it will keep getting better each year and year. This isn't the end of the local recovery strategy as when this is published. So yeah, and it's definitely a real focus on technology to build the LNRS as well, looking at opportunities. Opportunity mapping has been a big part of that, and that will hopefully cover some land. It will 100% cover certain landowners' holdings.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. I think that iteration needs to be paramount. A question for everyone. So if everyone could just have like a one sentence answer to this, I'd be really interested. The question from Neil is just looking ahead, what do each of you see as the next level for Land App, whether it's functionality, collaboration, or impact, particularly in driving joined up action between landowners, conservation bodies, and governments. So I don't know whether Glenn, you want to answer that one first.
Yeah, I actually just think data tracking. So all forms of data, having a kind of a GIS linked database for species recovery and everything else that you're trying to do within the landscape.
Like almost auditability.
Yeah.
Thanks, Glenn. Sophie, from what you know of LandApp, I know you're probably the only one that doesn't use it. What do you think, I suppose, collaborative tools, what role do they play moving forward in the environment sector?
I think I'll probably follow on from Glenn's point. It's very much having that consistent foundational base of data across all of these cases, all the different bodies that, it's common, it can be used over there. It's you're working off the same foundational data ultimately.
Yeah. Thanks, Sophie. And Matt?
Don't really boring, but I can't really disagree with those answers, to be honest. I think it's just getting that collaboration is really vital if we want to make changes across the whole of the country.
Yeah, we need everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. We need to make sure that the status quo is all moving. And I still think there's a lot of inefficiencies where people are restarting from scratch, whereas actually there's a wealth of knowledge out there. If we can share it, that's really useful. And we'll pass it on to the product team. Got a question for another one for, Sophie. Sophie, can you just quickly answer, is the field boundary data available in Wales as well, or is it purely an English data set?
No, so it's Great Britain coverage for the field boundaries data.
Perfect.
So, yes.
Great. Well, yeah, if you're Amir, if you're free next week, do to come and join, even if you're in Wales, because it will cover that land. A question from Ian Crosher. Glenn just talked about carbon. Are you aware of the spatial prioritization of land management for carbon in 2023, which is a data set designed to help with some of this thinking? I've personally not heard of that data set, land management for carbon, but I don't know whether, Glenn, you have.
No, that's a new one for me. But
yeah,
just on that, Dan, I guess the land use framework is the other really key one that's coming in terms of land use optimization. So that probably links to that carbon question as well.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think the land use framework, and even just more generally in the sector, there's a lot of good data sets being made available from a top-down perspective. The bit that we're trying to answer is how do they receive data from the bottom up? I think there's a lot of benefit that could happen if, for example, we empower digital submissions and remove from paper-based maps. And we are driving an initiative called Making Land Digital for exactly that. I think a lot of the strategy is getting good data sets out, but there's a lot of great knowledge out there that if the system was a bit more joined up, we could really learn and move forward with. And hopefully the land use framework is a good process for that. A question from Neil: as climate change accelerates pressures on land use, such as flooding and food security, how can data and platforms like LandApp support more adaptive, resilient management decisions? I guess probably for Matt first, and then Glenn.
It's a tough one, There's pressure continues to increase on land, but it's just about having all the information, all the tools available to be able to make evidence-based decisions rather than just going on your gut. You have to base the decisions you make on previous examples, using resources like conservationevidence.com, for example, and just solid data sets, just to make sure you make the right decisions at the right time. Otherwise, we're in trouble.
Yeah. Glenn, any thoughts on kind of being more adaptive to resilient planning?
I mean, I think if you consider the impact of climate change over time, and the implications of that, so coastal sea levels, for example, water pathways, water availability. Whenever you hear the predictions around that sort of stuff, it's always represented at a kind of a map level. So integrating that predictive modeling within a mapping context allows you as a kind of a land manager to adapt spatially to what might be coming down the line, and particularly consider resilience planning within the long term for projects. So if you take Wendling Beck, it's effectively permanent land use change. What are what are the right species and the right design to put in to kind of start to mitigate some of those climate impacts over time. And that could be something as simple as tree species or the type of habitat that you've got, or even thinking about migration of species northerly as we go through climate impacts. So yeah, it's definitely got a role to play.
Yeah. I think from my perspective, the perfect plan has to work fundamentally for that farming business. And there isn't one right answer. I think there's obviously loads of different routes you could go. I think you're on the extreme end of nature recovery, which we definitely need, but there's other farmers that need to produce food, particularly if we're going to be more self-sufficient. So I think speaking to people, understanding your options and coming up with a pragmatic plan that's in line with things like the recovery strategy, but also fundamentally makes sense as a farming business. There's where we've got to strike. You can't just look at one particular metric so that people blinkered just on carbon, for example. That's very frustrating because it has knock-on consequences elsewhere. So the more holistic you can look at your land and understand you as a farming business or you as a land manager being profitable and moving forward while also ticking these other boxes, we're hopefully going to see the base rise.
But even in even in just the purely the arable side or the farm side, grade one land today will not be grade one land in 2100. It's the arable sector will shift westerly is the prediction within the UK. So it's trying to anticipate that shift and put resilience into businesses as well.
Yeah,
It's building connections again, isn't it? Connectivity again, banging on about it, but I guess it's the only way to build that is through collaborative working again, isn't it? And recognizing the best routes for it to allow that shift. I mean,
absolutely. And I think the people are here to accept that challenge. And I think collectively we can move forward, and really excited. I'm conscious it's past 1 o'clock. So I don't know whether speakers, you're free for another 3 minutes just to answer the final 2 questions I can see. If anyone needs to shoot off, Glenn, if you do need to shoot off, please do. Thank you so much. I appreciate you've got a busy calendar. Just thank you to all the speakers. Please fill out your survey on your way out if you've attended. But we're just quickly crack through these last final questions, if that's okay. But if speakers, you need to drop off, no harm done. Okay. So if Glenn's still smiling, I'm going to go for one for him. Glenn, question from Martin Steer. Are there or will there be any ISO or BS standards developed for all the monitoring systems, particularly with respect to the ones you're looking after?
Well, I think that's a good question. I think the foundation of that is actually in the BSI standards that are coming. So the flex standards 701 to 705, I think they are. Starting with kind of high integrity nature standards and then moving on to carbon, nutrients, etc. I think there is the kind of a tacit understanding within those that the monitoring is a kind of a critical part of that. But whether they will develop specific standards for monitoring is a good question. But yeah, I would imagine the logic would follow. But I am going to jump off now because I'm supposed to be on call.
Glenn, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so just looking down the list, question from, I know that's for Glenn. We've moved on from that. There's a question more generally for Land App, just so I can quickly answer, from Neil. Given the increasing importance of joined up delivery across agencies like DEFRA, Environment Agency, RPA, and Forestry Commission, is Land App currently collaborating with these public bodies? If so, how are those partnerships helping to align policy and practical decisions? Neil, the short answer to that is yes. We have end users from each of those public bodies, so people using the mapping tool. But I think at a broader level, it's that integration approach. We pull a lot of data from government systems, whether that's field parcel data or habitat data or other types of data sets. But we are working on a thread of communication about submission. At the moment, how do we best transfer data in a standardized way, similar to how Matt's using it, for example, but so DEFRA can start to ingest this data and become more efficient, but also get, I guess, hopefully a greater satisfaction from those applicants. It's been done in tax before, making tax digital happened, and it works. We now would like to see it happening in land. So that's hopefully that one. Matt, could you see the creation of a digital twin approach to help move things forward into the future, particularly bringing in climate impacts?
Yeah, so digital twin, this is really new, this is bleeding edge stuff. We're actually working with University of Surrey, I believe, to look at that for one of our sites. So it's basically where you build an almost perfect model of the land in relation to what you see on the ground is what you get in a digital version, almost visually and with information. It is a huge task. So at the minute, it's really early days, and I'm interested to see where it goes. But at the minute, I find it's quite an intimidating thing, and just the scale of that across at landscape scale, to me, seems impossible at this stage, to be honest, from what I've seen. But you know, in the next 10 years or so, I think it could be a really useful thing, like such a realistic, because a good model is really useful for prediction, like we've discussed. So the more accurate the model,
better the quality of the data, the better the output.
indeed.
I think the ethos that we're going for is we don't need all the answers to be able to know we're heading in the right direction. So we know that we need to protect rivers. We know we need to connect up habitats. We know we need to produce food in a better way. We know we need to look after soil. So if we can build plans with that in mind, while still striving to be perfect, we're at least going to be heading in the right direction. So yeah, fingers crossed we can get there, but unsure how close we are in fact. I'm going to call it to a close. Sophie, Matt, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to Kathy and Rosie behind the scenes that's been helping. The session has been recorded, so it'll be on YouTube fairly soon. If you've got any other questions, please do reach out and we can put you in touch with any of the speakers or anything else you've heard. And enjoy the day. I hope it's sunny where you are. And thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.